Welcome to Just Curious. Today I'm joined by Kai Vandeloo, a seasoned enterprise SaaS leader and AI strategist with deep experience in AI-powered product development and company-wide adoption. Kai has spent over a decade embedding AI into enterprise software products and recently led a comprehensive AI adoption program at User Testing, where AI was implemented across the entire organization to improve efficiency and innovation. Today, we'll explore how AI is reshaping digital products and internal workflows, and the concept of the five-person unicorn, how AI can enable small, agile teams to create massive value. We'll also dive into Kai's experience leading AI adoption at scale and discuss the key lessons business leaders should take from his work. Kai, welcome to Just Curious.
Thank you.
You're a longtime technology leader, most recently serving as Chief Product, Chief Technology, and Chief Innovation Officer at User Testing. You've been involved in bringing AI into software products for almost a decade. How does this current wave, let's call it from November 22 on, compare to other technology shifts you've seen, cloud, social, and mobile, in terms of potential impact and opportunity?
I think it's the biggest shift I've experienced in my whole career, from 3-tier client server, the internet, and all these more recent shifts you mentioned on. It's huge, has enormous opportunity. And I think it's maybe also the easiest to adopt for companies. It's the lowest lift to get started with compared to some of these other shifts that required big development efforts and required rethinking things at large scale, while a lot of the AI things are easy to get started with and have tremendous potential to redefine how we do work, redefine how we build companies, redefine who does what within a company. So I think it's enormous.
And when it comes to easy to get started, obviously it's easy to use ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity or whatever your model of choice is. Is that what you mean by easy to get started? Or you mean even for a user testing, as an example, to begin implementing it to transform workflows, it's just a lot easier than prior investments in new technology that you've seen?
Exactly. I think a lot of that is because you can use all these AI tools to augment humans. So we all can start using these tools now to do a better job, to make our own lives easier, to get more done. And you can use them to replace humans, which takes a bit more thought. And you can use them then to completely rethink processes within a company and go for the really big 10x productivity improvements. But you can take each one of these steps, and at user testing, we had this little framework for AI adoption where level 1 is just augment existing people who work within the organization, just let them do a better job faster. Level 2 was turn things into internal self-service where other employees, other teams within the company can self-service things that they would have to go to someone, to a colleague, and get things done, and now they can do it themselves. And then the third level would be to externalize this as an external customer vendor facing self-service. So, and if you want an example of this, it's like our security team did a great job with this, using AI to respond to security questionnaires, which the first step was they just used available tools, ChatGPT in that case, to better respond to security questionnaires. The next step was building a custom GPT that sales engineers and others who needed these security questionnaires filled out could use themselves. So no security analysts needed at peak load times. And then the third step then would have been to open this up to customers who can submit their questionnaires directly and get automated AI-powered responses back. So I think because you can design these step-by-step implementations, it's a relatively easy technology to uptake.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit more about your work at user testing. But before, I also want to touch on that 10 times opportunity. You've talked about AI enabling five-person unicorns, a tiny team that can achieve 10 times the results with AI. Can you talk a little bit of what this looks like?
Exactly what it looks like, but I think conceptually, the key thing is, and again, you can start small by augmenting people in their existing roles. And if you look at pick something, software development. You can give every developer access to code generation tools, and you can have AI-powered testing tools and things like that. And I think you can probably double the productivity of a development organization if you do this thoughtfully, you do it systematically. But if you really would rethink who does what in an organization, and do we really need all these roles we have today with product management and engineering and many different kinds of engineers for different layers in the stack, and quality engineers and DevOps, and do we really need all of this if we can generate code starting from customer needs? And how would we organize this differently? And I think such things can really truly create X opportunities if you rethink the workflows completely with automation first, not just augmenting who does what today.
Yeah.
And that's where, if you start a new company, I don't think anybody in their right mind would create all the roles that we have, neither in product development nor in the go-to-market organization that established companies have today. I would just go for automation first and humans where it truly matters, like in having human relationships to your customers. Hard to automate that. But a lot of other things on the go-to-market side, I would take an automation first approach. And I think there's a lot we can automate. And that's true for every function.
Yeah. How do you identify work that can be automated and work that can lead to a 10 times result?
I think you have to look at it very much outside in. You have to look at it, what are the outcomes that you're after? Like in product development, if you take a whole product development organization and include support and maybe customer success managers in that, the outcome is a satisfied customer using your software effectively and using the software the way it was designed. And what do you need to make that happen? You don't need the existing roles and the existing way of working per se. You can probably get to the same outcome in an entirely different way if you have these powerful AI tools that you can use to automate a lot of the work. And the same is true for go-to-market. The outcome that you want is satisfied customers. Well, first they need to become customers, they need to buy, and then they need to be satisfied, and they need to keep buying more. That's the outcome you're after. You're not after making sales calls or producing marketing content. Those are not outcomes. Those are means to an end. And I think if you look at it from the outcome and you think about how you can achieve the desired outcome in new ways and in very automation first ways, I think you can build a 5-person unicorn. I think you can serve a lot of customers, build a lot of product with very few people.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, and you just touched on it in your answer, what the tension between maybe a 2 times return, which is looking at a workflow and breaking it down into an SOP and then kind of automating the steps to become more efficient versus looking for an outcome and using technology that enables you to do things you couldn't do before, to do it in a transformative way. How do you, as someone, I guess, who has led this effort before, how do you go? The first one seems easiest, right? Like, here's the steps, here's where people are involved. It takes Jane 10 hours to do this. So we can augment Jane with some automation and it takes her an hour. That seems relatively straightforward. The 10 times opportunity, which is more sort of, here's the job we're looking to accomplish, let's do it in a different way. How do you do that part?
I don't see anybody doing it today, but I think taking the first step by augmenting people in the process today is a great start, because that also allows people, they get more comfortable with these tools, and it starts generating some creativity across the organization. So I would start there, but I think a few people within the company need to rethink workflows and processes and take a very outcome-centric approach. And it's different, and it's, of course, much harder to do because now you're replacing people. So I don't see this happen at a large scale yet. But where I do see it happen is among startups. A lot of founders who talk about that I'm going to invest in technology before I start hiring people.
And why do you think startups are more willing to do that? Because they are cash constrained and also leaning into technology intrinsically?
And they don't have much in place that they need to change. So if you just starting today, you don't have a lot to change. It's always harder to change things than to build something from scratch. So I think it's much easier when you start a company. Plus, I think as people do that, they are thinking bigger as well and being more open-minded than people in an existing structure, in an organization with history, with personal relationships. It's much harder to change that. But I think it will come. It's inevitable, because if some companies start doing this, or if some of these very innovative startups become bigger, 10x advantage is a huge advantage on a competitive side. If you can do X more, or you can get the same output with 1/10 of the resources, that's a huge shift. So if one company starts doing this in an industry, in a niche, their competitors will be forced to follow pretty quickly.
Yeah. At user testing, you led an AI adoption program. You spoke to the security example earlier on. What was the driving force between this initiative?
It was a concern that our CEO, Andy, and I had, that what happens if competitors do this faster than we do? What happens if a startup comes into our space without any baggage, who can build maybe a comparable product, but runs it 10 times more efficiently than we do? What happens? Scared us a bit. So we said, let's make sure we are the ones that we stay on the leading edge of this. We were the market leader in our little niche, and we wanted to make sure to use that position to our advantage. We wanted to make sure that we transform faster than anybody else. So it was a little bit of a defensive move as the market leader. We wanted to make sure not to get disrupted by somebody doing this faster and better than we do.
And so where did it start? How did it kick off? Did you identify a bunch of areas of the business that you thought had the potential to be disrupted by AI? Tell me a little about where you started.
Yeah, I think the first thing we did, and I'm quite proud of this because I think it was a good move. This came out of a conversation that Andy and I had one day in the office about, let's make sure that we pave the way for AI adoption before we start engaging everybody. And by paving the way, I mean, let's make sure that we get security, privacy, legal on board with our thinking before we get all the employees excited, and before we have employees running around buying tools and trying things out, and then having security or legal come in and say, hey, you can't do this. So we worked with the security, legal, and privacy teams and talked about their responsibility in this versus the responsibility of the executive team and the CEO. And we made it very clear to them that they are here to give guidance. They are here to tell us what the risks are, and then we make the decisions. And if something goes wrong, violate some customer agreements, that's not the legal team's fault. If we have a security incident and the security team had warned us about it, it's not their fault that there is incident happens. We take the responsibility, and they are here to advise us. And I think that creates a whole different mindset in these teams. They are used to often thinking that if something happens and they approved it, it's their fault. It's not how it should work. They should be here to advise. They are the experts, and they should say, hey, this is a risk you're about to take, and then we make the decision. And we had this conversation with these teams. We got them very close. We formed an AI council where we had representation from security, privacy, legal, and a few executives and some other thought leaders from across the company. So we created a little bit of infrastructure around this before we started engaging all the employees. And once we did that, we took this out to a very broad group of employees. We got enterprise ChatGPT licenses, first for about a third of the employees, but that was a little awkward. And then we got it for all the employees. We engaged everybody in little competitions to come up with ideas for custom GPTs to build and workflows to improve, workflows to change. We picked some of those suggestions and got people together. We were fortunate we had a very good relationship with OpenAI, so we could do like little hackathons and workshops at the OpenAI offices in San Francisco. It's a little perk for those who had submitted the most popular ideas. So we tried to first lay a foundation to make sure that security, privacy, legal doesn't get in the way once we start. We also worked with the IT team to make sure that we could integrate, in this case, custom GPTs with our internal data sources. That makes the custom GPT so much more interesting if it's actually operating partly on our own data as opposed to just in a vacuum. And so we did that. So we tried to do a lot of this enabling work, and then we got the whole organization engaged. We let everybody participate. Everybody who had ideas and wanted to contribute, we let them participate in this. So we didn't pick people and say, you are the innovators, but rather we opened it up for everyone to participate in the innovation.
Yeah. And that participation was in service of ensuring that adoption would be high for whatever ultimate solutions the organization designed, or was it in service of identifying what problems could be solved with AI powered solutions? What was the role of encouraging usage and these hackathons as part of this adoption strategy?
It was both of those. I would say the first and foremost, it was to get ideas from across the whole company. And we did get ideas that I think none of us on this central council and those of us who had spent the most time thinking about this ever would have come up with. And they were good ideas and they were implementable. Once they got implemented, they had a high impact in that area. So I think you need the subject matter experts, the people who live this every day. They come up with a lot of good ideas. And some of these ideas were augmenting the current users. Some people came up with ideas that replaced 80% of their workload, and kind of laughed at it and said, yeah, I'm replacing myself, but I can go do something else. So it was the idea generation, I think, was the big one. And then the second thing, I think, was this collaboration, that people started talking to each other and people got together. And when we did a workshop, we flew people into San Francisco from all over the place, from Europe, from all over North America. And these people started like coming up with whole new ideas during the workshop because they were there together. They were intensely comparing notes, sharing lessons learned. So that was another great thing, that this became top of mind for like a lot of people. Those who participated in the workshop, certainly when the workshop was over, they didn't stop thinking about this. It became a habit. And then the third one that you mentioned also is the adoption, that like once you have people engaged in creating things, adoption happens easily. You don't need to push anything on them.
What were the biggest wins from this effort?
There were many small, like tactical wins where people built very useful custom GPTs. In this case, for our CEO himself actually built one of the most used GPTs to generate customer stories. So became a big hit in the field. Lots on the customer facing side. We had a lot of things where you can generate materials that are truly personalized for the person you're going to go talk to, like a first call deck. Doesn't have to be the standard one. Every target audience gets their own first call deck, and a lot of content generation use cases, a lot of workflow improvements where we had handoffs and frictions between functions and maybe forms that needed to be filled out. One example was our professional services organization had like an intake form when a salesperson wanted to sell services with the software, and this form was hard to fill out and people never filled it out properly. So they built a GPT that the salespeople could just interact with, and the GPT kept asking until it had all the information it needed. So it removed a lot of friction. It made sure that the professional services organization had all the information needed when they started working on their part of the quote. So a lot of things like that removed friction in individual steps and that started automating. As I said, we had this layers of first you augment existing codes, and then the second level is you start opening things up for internal self-service. And I don't think we got to external self-service while I was still there, but we certainly were on a good path to it.
Yeah. How do you think about the human impact of effort like this? You mentioned that some people came up with ideas that would reduce their workload by 80%. And there are two options as a result of that. One is you can find things for them to do. They can be doing new and perhaps higher value things, but perhaps those things aren't identified yet. Or you may no longer have the need for that person, or maybe that team needs 80% fewer individuals. How do you navigate that?
The cool thing about this is, of course, these people, they became heroes across the company. They got a reputation as innovators and doers because they also implemented this themselves. So they kind of created new careers in a way for themselves. So I think that was at the scale we did this at, where it didn't start replacing whole teams yet or anything like that. It was positive for the individuals, I'd say, because they became broadly known within the company as being very innovative.
Yeah. You said that software companies need to disrupt or be disrupted when it comes to AI. Tell me a little bit more about what you mean there.
I think in any technology shift, being an incumbent is kind of hard. Because like when the cloud came, the SaaS delivery model became popular. Very few of the on-premise incumbents became SaaS leaders. A lot of the SaaS companies we know and admire today, they were born SaaS native. There were very few of the incumbents who managed to become SaaS leaders. With this, the magnitude of the change that we see now, which I think is much bigger than SaaS ever was, as an incumbent, you really need to be very concerned about getting disrupted, because it doesn't matter what niche you're in, doesn't matter how deep your customer relationships are or how much data you have, somebody is going to try to come after you. And chances are, if they do it in an AI first way, that they can deliver this 10x value to the customer. If they rethink what is the customer outcome, why is a customer buying this product? Nobody wants to buy a SaaS product. Like the customer is trying to achieve something else. If you can rethink how you deliver that and deliver the same value at a fraction of the cost or much higher value at the same cost, you're disrupting. And I think the many incumbents are going to face this.
Yeah. Do you think it's true for non-software companies as well?
It's probably true for all digital experiences that get provided. And I think for many non-software companies, if you look at financial services companies like banking and insurance, and a lot of the customer interaction already is digitized. If you can rethink the customer interaction and the processes behind it in an AI first way, I think you can create new financial institutions that operate much, much more efficiently, provide a much better customer experience using much less resources. And so I think most industries where there is a digital component, I think is very ripe for this. And maybe there are some on the physical side as well. Like you can rethink manufacturing flows if you go about that in an AI first way. I think that's maybe a little harder. But everything that is digital centric, not just software companies, I think this is going to happen.
Yeah. What are the biggest lessons from over a decade of embedding AI into software products?
I think the big one is you have to look at this from an outcomes perspective. You have to look at, if you're a software company or you're providing some kind of digital experience, what are your users and what are your buyers actually trying to achieve? What's the outcome they're after? And if you're doing it internally within the company, what are the outcomes that you want at a high level? And then work your way in and rethink how you do things. A little bit of like bottoms up or inside out innovation is good to get started and to prove things and to kind of grease the wheels. But to get the really big impact, you have to look at this from the outside. You have to look at it from the outcome and work your way back from there. I think that's the big takeaway in this.
Yeah. When you were at user testing, you mentioned that a lot of the identified opportunities or problems were solved through the building of custom GPTs. Did you end up building any custom software? And how do you think about the custom software versus, I guess, lighter weight GPT decision?
I get this question a lot, and I think there are actually three things. One is buying AI-powered point solutions that somehow fit into your current system landscape. One is just using the lightweight GPT or whatever, if it's Claude or whatever it is, and in a systematic way. And the third one is really developing software around this. And I would gravitate. We had great success at user testing with the second one, where we got enterprise ChatGPT license for everybody. We helped people build custom GPTs. We connected these things to our internal data sources, like our support ticket system, our knowledge base, our data warehouse. So this data became available, and you can do a lot with these custom GPTs. They become quite powerful tools. I do think that there is room for a little bit more sophisticated development as well, where you can actually program against the APIs of the LLMs. You can build your own retrieval augmented generation infrastructure. I think there's room for that as well, a little more sophistication, but it's not like you need to spin up a huge development team. I think if you get maybe 2 people who really understand this, they can create wonders. But again, they should not be the only ones defining what gets done, and they should not be the only ones doing this. I think you need this whole bottom-up idea generation. And that's a nice thing about everybody can build a custom GPT. It's so easy to do. And if you keep that going and then you pick maybe a few of these use cases where you say, we're going to invest a little bit more. We're actually going to build our own layer around this. And maybe we're going to build an integration to Slack so people can use it from wherever they are, and a few things like that.
And what's the role of AI-powered startups or agentic startups? There are hundreds and hundreds of them. Where do they fit in?
I think we'll have to see how this all comes together. I think the concept of an agent is very natural for a lot of what we've been talking about. And in fact, my first patent I ever got 25 years ago was around using agents for application integration. So I think the concept of an agent is great. An agent that understands the goal it's trying to achieve and finds ways to get to it instead of having to be told exactly how to do things. I think it's great. With the LLMs we have today, with all this AI power, you can really define useful agents. So I think the concept of an agent is great, and then you need some form of agent framework, and you need some infrastructure around this. Like the agents have to be able to identify themselves when they call into business applications. You cannot just accept any incoming request. And so you need a little bit of a framework for these agents. You have to make sure they scale. You have to make sure they're secured, that the agents respect company policies. So you need some kind of agent framework. Then does the world need 1,000 of them? I don't think so.
Yeah. For companies that haven't fully integrated AI yet, what's the first thing they should do?
Get started. I think get started, tell people in the organization that this is a priority. And then as we did, I think it was very helpful to again, get security, privacy, legal, get these teams on board and get them to issue guidelines on what matters. And then you can let loose the creativity among your employees. But you have to get started. Like if you don't get started, if you analyze this another year, you're behind.
Yeah. And when it comes to starting, would you recommend to start by bringing together legal and compliance? Would you recommend a both top down, hey, we're going to go all in on AI, and a bottoms up, hey, we want your thoughts on where we should focus? How should someone manifest that starting?
Yeah, no, I think you got it. It's the top down, the messaging, and you have to do that by example as well. You have to have an executive team that actually uses AI and that brings it into how they work with their teams. And if you use AI to generate documents, it's nothing to be ashamed of. I think you should put the prompt you used in the document somewhere in a footnote, like this was generated by AI. So like you lead by example, and you get the formal aspects of security, privacy, legal, you get that covered, and then you encourage people to go for it.
You are advising companies on AI strategy now. What companies should reach out to you?
Anybody is welcome to do most of my work with kind of mid-sized VC, PE-backed companies, some very early stage startups. But I'd say sweet spot probably are these kind of mid-sized companies that are leaders, incumbents in their space, and that feel the need to take a leap forward. Maybe they already have identified very agile, fast-moving startups that are starting to come after them, or at least they've realized that's going to happen. I think that is kind of my sweet spot.
Awesome. Kai, I really appreciate you coming by. Just curious. It's been a great discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been great.
Cool.